Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle, and today, Tiffany, I'm going to just throw it over to you because you're presenting today's topic.
Right. Well, first of all, I should say that right now, as we're sitting here taping this, not quite so much now because I have earphones in, but I can still hear it. There is someone somewhere above my head playing Debussy on the piano. And so, Katie, my dream has come true for the second time in a row in my life, which is that I have someone in my building near me who's an amazing piano player. This happened when I was living in Trastevere, in my last apartment in Trastevere, when Aurelio was a baby. It was that year, I think, that all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I could hear Chopin's Ballade No. 1 being played very nearby. And you can tell when it's live and when it's a recording. You can just tell. And I couldn't believe it because that apartment was kind of like, a lot of expats are coming in and out. There's a few Airbnbs in there. There weren't like any old Italian families that had been there for generations in that building. It was mostly, people coming and going. So not as common that you would have someone with their own piano and playing it that well. And I was just marveling at it. And that piece of music, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. Like, you don't just sit down and play that because you had 8 years of piano. Like, that's a conservatory level piece of music. I kept listening to it and I kept listening and thinking, this has got to be a recording. It's too good. But then he'd stop, because he was practicing. And finally, I went upstairs. I'm going to find out who this is. Finally found the guy, a very nice man who was American, actually, in his 50s, and had decided just on the drop of a hat to move to Italy. He had been in the military. I think he was retired from the military and was like, hey, I'm going to move to Italy, and happened to also be a concert pianist. Amateur, I suppose. But anyway, I used to go over and listen to him play. So this is a long way of saying that just in the past week or two, we've had someone move into this building who is playing the piano, and I haven't been able to hear it quite as well. So I think it's a little bit further off, not like right above me, but maybe on the other side of the building. She's playing Debussy, which is another one of my favorite piano composers. I mean, like, there's nothing like just listening to a little Debussy when you're like lounging around your house and knowing that it's coming from what could be the next room. I just love that. I don't know, maybe some people would be annoyed by it, but I just love it. And so I'm thrilled. What this all relates to, the point that I'm getting to, is the first thought that popped into my head was, I want to take piano lessons.
Why not have you be the person who's playing this echoing through the halls?
Well, I will never be able to play that well. Definitely not Chopin's Ballade No. 1. That is not my fate. No, I mean, it's just, I have played piano on and off, but I've never really made an effort. I've never taken lessons since I was a child. I can read music, so I can pick out songs, and I can figure out the fingering, and I have a basic understanding of the instrument, but I'm not going to improve by myself, I don't think.
Yeah.
So what all this relates to, whether or not I'm going to take piano lessons, which I haven't truly decided, is this. It's, when we have a sudden desire to do something, to study something, to try something new, to try an activity. And I mean, I think that this is especially probably true for children, because they're the ones who are really out there trying new stuff, really. And adults, we do it too sometimes, hopefully. What is it that sparks that interest for us? Is it and you hear stories about people. I had a friend who, when I was in college, who was a concert pianist. She was studying to become a concert pianist, and she was from Cuba. And not that that has anything to do with the story, but that's one of the things I remember most about her. We were all sort of talking about how we got into music, and she said, when I was a little girl, my father died, and I went into deep, deep depression. And my
Hmm.
mother took me to a psychologist, and the psychologist said, give her piano lessons
Hmm.
as a way to distract her. And
Hmm.
she just fell in love with the piano, and the result is that then she becomes, this amazing pianist. Obviously, that's not going to happen to everybody. Every child who takes piano lessons isn't going to become a conservatory level pianist. But I mean, what is it? Sometimes you think, well, is it something that truly came from you, from within you? Or is it something that came from outside? Like, did something spark your interest? Did someone who you admire do something and you suddenly want to do it? Or were you just exposed to this? Like, are you more exposed to sports as a child? Or are you more exposed to the arts or to
Hmm.
science? Like, is that what makes the difference, And, there are families in which, there are several incredible musicians in the same family. And there are some families in which, you have a long line of scientists and then one of the children becomes an artist or vice versa. So, I mean, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but I think it's a fun idea to explore. And I
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but I have so many different examples of I can trace back what it was that sparked the interest in me.
Oh, I know. I was just thinking, like, could I go back and see what sparked the interest? But maybe. Give me one of your examples.
Well, I don't know if this counts because I was so little that it clearly did come from within me as well as coming from without. But when I was 2 years old, my older sister, who was 5 at the time, was taking ballet lessons. As so it's so typical for little girls to take ballet lessons. And my mom took me with her because I was 2, so I went everywhere with her. And we went and we picked up my sister or dropped her off, or I don't know, we were waiting there. I have very hazy memories of this moment, but my mom has very good memories. And she tells me I stood watching this class completely dumbstruck. My
Hmm.
jaw hung open and I couldn't tear my eyes away from these girls who were doing ballet. And I said, Mom, I want to do ballet. I want to take ballet. And I was kind of really too young for it, really. And she went out and she bought me a pair of ballet slippers, which were the smallest kind that they make. And they were
Hmm.
too big for me. I still have them, by the way. She saved them and gave them to me. They were too big for me. And if you look at photographs of me between the ages of 2 and 4, I only wore ballet clothes.
Right.
I sometimes would wear other clothes on top if it was cold, but like every single photograph of me, I'm in ballet clothes, like a leotard and tights, not a tutu, leotard and tights, like traditional, like going to ballet lesson,
Hmm.
leotard and tights with the ballet slippers. And I remember saying, Mom, why did you only ever take pictures of me on like dance class day? And she's like, No, honey, you don't understand. That's how you dressed for 2 years.
So, I mean,
Um,
it might be hard and hazy to remember, but do you have any idea what it was that you were seeing that captivated you? Was it the clothes? Was it the movement? Was it the fact that your sister was doing it? Was it the music? That it was a
I
bunch of
don't think
little
it.
girls dancing together? It could be any number of things. Do you have any
I
idea?
did love the music. I loved the music. I loved the bar exercises, the
Mm-hmm.
pliés. I loved doing that. I still to this day love the classical traditional ballet bar exercises. I
Mm-hmm.
love the music. It wasn't really about my sister, I don't think, 'cause she never, she was not interested, and so she didn't continue taking it. And I ended up taking ballet for years and years and years, and then I sort of dropped out in, I would probably say middle school, late middle school. I stopped doing it. And the funny thing is, Katie, and this is what I thought about before I thought about that 2 year old me watching the other ballet girls. This I have a very, very distinct memory of because I was so much older when I was in high school and I was already deeply entrenched in theater, deeply entrenched in, voice lessons, kind of having found my path, that what I thought was my path of going into classical singing. We went to see, my mom and I went to see the Phantom of the Opera. And there's a scene in that play in which the lead character, she's like a chorus girl, right? In this opera. She's a ballet dancer in this opera that's being produced in the late 1800s. She's a singer, really, but she's dressed like a ballerina and she's got ballet slippers on. And, it's kind of like they're showing like the backstage of these girls like preparing for this show. And for some reason, and it's very similar to this piano player upstairs, it's kind of superficial. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There happens to be a piano player in the building. I'm like, all of a sudden, oh, I want to do that. It's kind of a superficial desire. And the same thing happened to me that night. I said, Oh, Mom, I want to take ballet lessons again. Here I was 14 or 15 years old. I wasn't a little girl anymore, and I certainly didn't have any ambition to become a professional dancer at that point in my life. But I missed it. I realized looking at the ballerinas, looking at which they weren't even doing, it wasn't even a ballet. It was musical theater performers dressed in ballet costume.
Right.
Just looking at the point shoes and everything, I missed that life. I missed all of that. I missed that. I missed doing that. And I said, I want to start taking ballet again. And I did. And I started ballet, I think it was freshman or sophomore year in high school, and I did it for the rest of high school. And I loved it.
So it makes me think of two different things. You telling that story. Because, I mean, I get the idea that you would see them on stage, like, all standing around as ballerinas and think, even not just the dancing, but also the standing around as ballerinas. Like, I miss sort of being a part of that crew. I can remember it's kind of the opposite effect, actually. So when I was a kid, I didn't do a lot of lessons as a kid. I did things that were sort of free or community-based, but I think that was because of financial means within my family. So I had a friend who did all sorts of cool things that I got to sit and watch and envy, but I didn't actually do them. I just watched her ice skate from the sidelines. I learned to figure skate at 5 a.m, and I used to go watch her, but I never had any designs that would be me out there. Although I did take piano lessons for 1 year, and personally, I did not like it one bit, actually. I liked being able to play the piano. I couldn't stand everything else about it. So that didn't last very long. And now, of course, as an adult, I wish I could play the piano better than I can. Oh, well. But I had something about you seeing a show. It reminded me of one night when I went to the Boston Pops concert. I think I was a middle schooler, probably a 7th or 8th grade. And when I was an elementary schooler, I took classes in the summer. It was some sort of summer program where kids could take a whole bunch of different things. And I always took gymnastics. And I was particularly good at the vault, where you run up and do a bunch of flips and land on the thing. And I was a very small, compact child. And so at the time they thought, well, if she really stays in this, I remember a coach saying this, if she stays in this, she's going to be great. She's going to be an amazing vaulter, because I had sort of a natural knack for what to do with my body that they thought was kind of unusual for that age. And I mean, I was equally terrible at the beam and at the uneven bars. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was across the board a talented gymnast, but I did seem to have some sort of natural knack for the vault. And I think we went to this Boston Pops concert, and I believe they must have played a song from the 80s. I don't remember what they were playing or what the circumstance was, but I believe that they played a song that was one that was kind of a popular one that they would play in the gym when we were doing these gymnastics exercises. I don't know. My guess would be it was Axel F., which was from Beverly Hills Cop, because that was a really popular one with... it made a really good tumbling pass, back in the day. And if you listen to it, you'll hear what I'm saying. But anyway, they were playing it, and all of a sudden I found that I was just in tears watching it. And you know what it was? It wasn't that I wish I could get back into it. It was that I hadn't stuck with it. It really is a sport that you have to build on and build on and build on. And I knew that it was too late for me. It wasn't like I was going to be 13 years old and getting into gymnastics. It was like I should have stayed. And it was a feeling I missed, and a thing I knew I didn't really have the confidence for because it had been so long. And I just felt like, oh, that was a thing that I could have done. And it was my first big opportunity to realize that there will come a time in life when your opportunity to do something is over. And that one comes earlier because of the way gymnastics is on the body. But
yeah, ballet is the same. No 14-year-old girl is going to step into ballet. It's too late by that point. Either you've already been spotted and you're on the track to be a professional, or it's never going to happen.
Well, I mean, it wasn't even that I felt like, oh, I should have been an Olympian. It was more that it just felt like, even physically now, it's too late to pick this up. You can't go from being a vaulter in 3rd grade to doing that same kind of motion with an more adult body. It just, it just doesn't happen. So that's one thing I thought of. The other thing I thought of was, how you sometimes have like kind of a little tiny trigger like that, like where you just see people on a stage standing around in ballet outfits and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do that. And I think for me, that you remember the movie Back to the Future, I assume.
Oh yes. Oh yes, very well. My sister was obsessed with that movie, and so we watched it a lot. I could probably quote entire scenes of it.
Yeah, yes, as could I. We could probably do the whole movie here if we really wanted to, but let's not. But I think that that movie was what triggered me to want to ride a skateboard because of the way that Marty McFly would ride his skateboard, holding onto the back of cars and like flinging himself onto sidewalks and such. But it's interesting because it's also specific in the sense that I didn't want to ride a skateboard and do tricks. Like I didn't want to be in a skate bowl or something like that. Like a lot of kids were interested in. I just wanted to use it for transportation. That was it. That was the extent. And so I bought my first skateboard at a yard sale, probably when I was 14 years old, and I would just ride it around in my driveway, learning how to like stand on it and steer it around. And then when I was in my early 20s, that is how I got around. I worked in a bar at the time, and I would leave my house with however many minutes I had to get to the bar, which was in the same neighborhood that I lived in, jump on my skateboard, ride it as fast as I could along the sidewalks and the streets, and like would pull up around the bar, wave to the guys. I would whip around this one corner to get to where the bar was, and I would wave to the guys in this other bar as I went past. And they called me Skatey Katie. And people always asked if I could, because there was a skate bowl nearby, and they always asked me if I was there. Did I hang out there on the weekends? Did I do this? And I'm like, no, I don't want to become like a skater. I don't want to become like a trick professional. I just want to use it to get from one place to another. And it is a rather unfussy type of transportation. It really is. Like imagine if I was riding a bike, I'd have to stop and lock it up somewhere. As it was, I just picked it up and walked inside and stuck it with my jacket in the back closet and
it's brilliant.
Did
really.
my shift. Yeah.
About it.
I know. And I think that comes from Back to the Future. Like I really think
so
that's
funny.
That's where it begins.
I'm going to tell Claudio that because he also grew up obsessed with that film. And when we were in Burbank the last time, he always does this. He's like, he knows these like random film locations of like these random, like, it's not like, oh my gosh, this beautiful backdrop. It's like, no, it's a street in LA. That's where Marty McFly is holding onto the back of the truck. And he's there taking pictures. And anyway, he will get a kick out of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I have another example, which is Aurelio.
Your son, for the new people.
My son, sorry.
Claudio,
so Aurelio, we are not big soccer people in this house. Not that either Claudio and I have anything against the sport of soccer, but this soccer culture, professional soccer culture in Italy is a bit obnoxious. And so and it's all pervading, it's like I feel like in the United States you've got basketball, you've got football, you've got hockey in certain parts of the country, you've got what's the other one, baseball, you've got so many different sports that lots of people are passionate about. But in Italy it's kind of just this one sport, and yes, other sports exist, but they're not anywhere nearly as popular. So you got this kind of like everybody's into calcio and everybody says, who do you support? You support Roma or Lazio? And I'm just roll my eyes and I just,
You're like, who's ever on when I'm at the party that's a soccer party? Like I'll just do whatever.
Yes. So anyway, we never watch it. It's never on. We're never following it. But of course, he came into contact with it through school friends, and in first grade he started, getting interested in it, and kind of got to the point where he really liked it. And can I take soccer lessons? And we're like, not right now. Maybe when you're older. Right now, you already signed up for some stuff. And then he kind of passed. The passion for it kind of passed, waned, let's say. And I even saw that, when he would be like, let's go outside and play. Like, he wouldn't always get the soccer ball. Sometimes he'd get his bike or his little scooter or whatever. And I was kind of thrilled about this secretly. And then he got, as regular listeners will already know, he got a Nintendo Switch for Christmas. And one of the games that he got with it is like a professional soccer game, right? And I mean, I gotta admit, it's like for a kid who grew up playing Atari, that those
Right.
games are quite they're quite realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these different teams. You can play on any team you want, and I can understand why a kid would love that. But point being, after about 2 days of playing this game, he went into his room, he got dressed in his soccer clothes, and he came out and said, I'm into soccer again. He just announced it. Guess who's back into soccer? And I was
Me.
like, oh,
Yeah.
great.
Uh,
But so I do think that these passions can certainly be triggered by outside factors, but I wonder if we have a true deep, an incredible talent. If someone, any person in the world, if they were to have an amazing talent, does that talent always come to the forefront? How
mm,
common is it for those talents to be completely overlooked and never discovered, even by the person? Because if a person doesn't have the opportunity to sit down at a piano,
hmm
how would they ever know that they could play the piano, that they had talent for it? Um,
Yeah, that's true because it is so much about opportunity and being able to try it and see if you're any good. And not only if you're any good, but if you like it at all.
if
That
you like it.
Yeah, it's that also the stirring of the soul, so to speak. Does something awaken in you when you get the chance to play the piano for the first time or for the 14th time, you know? Yeah, it's a good question because we always think that if somebody's a master at something, extremely talented at, that of course they would have found their way, but maybe not. I'm sure it's as much about opportunity as it is discovery. Although you may just be sort of naturally pulled in directions, even as a person, if you don't have an opportunity. Like, even if you never get the chance to play the piano, you still might just have a pause when you hear a piece of music. It might wake you up more than it might wake up somebody else.
Yeah, but what a tragedy though. Like when you look at for me it's easy to make comparisons with music because that's the kind of world that I lived in for so long. But you look at an incredible professional musician and you think, what if that talent exists, that same exact talent? Obviously, you have to have the drive and the discipline to practice. But what if that same talent exists in this Joe Schmo who's sitting next to me and it never was developed, never discovered, maybe never even discovered? And, it's sad. It makes me sad.
Well, I mean, it must happen like 1,000 times over, like over
I'm
and over
sure
and
it
over again. Yeah.
I'm sure it does, but it's nevertheless. I mean, it's an unanswerable question. But I love to think about, how much is external, how much is internal. We've all seen The Queen's Gambit, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
where the little orphan girl walks down and sees the guy playing chess and immediately knows that that's what she's supposed to be doing. Is it really like that? If there was a little orphan who had that kind of talent for the piano, would they find their way? Would they find a piano? Would they find a teacher? Maybe they would. Maybe, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I find it kind of fun to tease out that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it's probably opportunity, and other parts probably tenacity. I had a friend who I actually met in Rome, and his parents, he had a lot of siblings, and his parents didn't have any money to like provide them with any kind of classes as a kid. I think it was similar with him. I think he wanted to play the piano, or I think specifically the organ. And his parents were like, well, if you want to learn how to play the organ, then go find somebody who plays the organ and see what you can do in exchange for them to give you lessons. That is the way to do it. And so I believe he found an organ player at a local church, somebody who was willing to let him sit with them, and in exchange he did all of their lawn mowing, and that's how he first started playing the organ. I mean, full tenacity. And of course, a parent that was suggested, like, we don't have the money, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. Go figure it out. Go try to find out how you can do this.
Yeah, I do have to say that those situations, as a parent, you want to give your children every opportunity. We all
Yes.
do. But, sometimes you hear about those situations and you're like, wow, those are the kids who are going to really go far because, they're the ones who really want it. And if you
Mm-hmm.
really want it, you'll make it happen. So I do kind of love those stories, although I don't walk the
You
walk,
don't live that
but I
way.
love the idea.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I get, I, uh,
Yeah, I mean, because you feel like you can let him try things out. You have the money to let him try things out.
well, we also have just one child.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that I believe that music education is so much more valuable than training for future professionals.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's great that there are professional musicians out there in the world, and we're all grateful for them and the beauty and the art that they bring to our lives. But there is so much value in studying music, even if no one is ever going to hear you, and even if you're bad at it, because musical learning and musical education, it does something to your brain. Well, first of all, I mean, obviously there's just the artistic aspect of it. You're just like going to an art gallery. You cannot help but be more enriched if you're doing something like that, whether or not you use that training for any practical purpose. But even just on a brain level, like it does something. It changes the connections in your brain, and they've proven this. And so for us, we knew we were going to give him music lessons, not because we had any designs that he would become a professional musician, but simply
Mm-hmm.
because, mostly because of this. And also because I think it's great as an adult to be able to play a musical instrument.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great gift.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I think that that's why we, well, I mean, you're speaking my sister's language right now because my sister is a music teacher. The whole time I'm like, thinking about how much music programs are cut from schools in America often to like save money.
Yeah, I think music should be like math. Like, look, here's the
Yes.
thing, Katie. And I say this to the other parents at my kids' school who scoff because the kids have to like do the recorder and stuff. Music is as important as math, period. You have to learn math. Why? We're not going to become mathematicians. I mean, maybe some of us will. Maybe some of us will become engineers, but the vast majority of people are not using algebra or anything past algebra in their daily lives. But yet we learn it. We learn it so that we're well-rounded people, and we learn it because it develops our brains. Music is the exact same thing, and it bothers me that it's not treated in the same way.
Well, and I think that that's why we have to like also work to try to provide the opportunities for other people to be able to get access to this stuff, you know?
Absolutely.
Because I mean, that is true. Like that, maybe there is an amazingly talented person who will just never get the opportunity, will never get the schooling, the means, the space in life, And I do think a lot about the people that don't have the space in life, that it's like, everything leads to another, and you're always just trying to stabilize and how do you provide opportunities for those people so they can make these bigger discoveries about who they want to be beyond basic survival? How can the opportunity exist when you're just trying to survive, but at the same point, it does exist. Like there's still a spark there, like the human energy to like create and make art and laugh and explore is in every place I've ever been, And so it is really a matter of, I guess, bringing back to that original question, like, will a person discover it no matter what? Will they have an artistic bent no matter what? Or whatever it is, a bent toward, it could be as much bent toward math, but whatever it is, like, do people naturally find their way is a really interesting question, because I have seen like people find their way even in the hardest of circumstances
Yeah, they
also.
have. Those are the most inspiring stories of all. I love the story of the Bronte sisters, although of course they were not living in deep poverty, but they were not wealthy either. I just remember as a child reading a story about them and about how they had this brother who was there was I think there was only one boy in the family, and all of the family resources were just completely poured into the son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sent off to school, and he was given the best tutors, and he was just a total abject failure in every single thing that he did. And the girls were just at home. They had basic schooling. They knew how to read and write, clearly. But, I just remember the stories of them writing by candlelight, having very little time in the day to write and having very little space, and no one took them seriously. But yet they all turned out, all these three sisters turned out to be these incredibly brilliant authors.
Mm-hmm.
I was inspired by that story.
Yeah, I mean, and that still happens everywhere, like all over the world, like where all the resources are poured into the sun,
Yeah,
and the
well, I don't know
girls
if
have
you've ever
to.
read A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf.
No, I have not.
She Well, she posits this hypothetical situation. What if Shakespeare had been a girl?
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened to her? With this burning, incredible, brilliant genius talent inside of her. Where would she have gone? What would she have done in that same time period? She would never have been able to succeed, according to Virginia Woolf. So yeah, it's an interesting to think about.
It is interesting to think about. Well, of course, we welcome your thoughts on this. If you want to send us an email, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. Or, just hit us up on one of the social medias. We're really not on Twitter much anymore. I will admit that.
It's not called Twitter anymore.
Right. So, maybe more Instagram, Facebook, somewhere in there.
Yes.
Right.
And Katie, well, before we close, Katie,
Yes.
I do want to ask you, should I take piano lessons?
I mean, do you have the time for piano lessons?
I mean, I think I could find the time to do it every other week and then practice for like 15 to 20 minutes a day. Because I was playing the piano for about 10 to 15 minutes a day last year as part of my establishing good habits thing. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. I just loved practicing. But like I said, I didn't feel like I was getting any better. And Aurelio has a wonderful piano teacher whom I just adore her. I just really, really like her. She's a brilliant pianist. And she comes to our house to teach Aurelio.
So it wouldn't be that big of a lift to have her spend an extra half an hour with you.
I think the hardest thing would be finding a spot in her schedule because her schedule is crazy. But it would be great for her because it'd be the same spot,
Yeah, yeah.
And she's quite affordable.
I mean, you might as well ask her about it. I mean,
Yeah.
when I took piano lessons back in the day, I went at the same time as my sister. And so this would be the dynamic maybe with you and Aurelio. And
Wait, together or one after the other?
together, but we both would get dropped off at the same time. So I would sit on the couch and read while my sister was getting
I
her
see.
lesson, and then she'd have to sit on the couch and read while I was getting mine. And I think
Okay.
that as far as ending our conversation about are you naturally drawn to certain things, I always looked forward to reading on the couch that hour, and she had a whole stack of Shel Silverstein books, and I looked forward more to reading Shel Silverstein than I did to when it was my turn to get up and do the lesson. So there you go.
There you go.
More drawn to the writing and less to the practicing the piano. Whereas I think my sister was the opposite, and she can correct
Was
me
it
if
your
I was
sister
wrong.
who
but-
ended up being, was it Dana who ended up being a piano teacher?
No, she's not so much a piano teacher, though she does play the piano.
Music teacher. I meant to
Yes.
say. Music teacher.
No, it was my sister Sarah. All three of us took piano lessons, and both Dana and Sarah kept up on it longer. I only lasted a year. But I think, and Sarah can correct me, but I believe that she was more kind of rattly and ready to go when it was my turn to be doing the lesson, where I could have lounged around reading those wacko poems all afternoon. I would have been fine with that. All right. Well, we should leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye.
What first pulled me into the bittersweet life was Katie's sound piece. I think several times I just listened to that intro without listening to the rest of the podcast because it brought me right into Rome. It brought Rome right into my room in Salem, Oregon. And slowly I began to listen to Katie and to Tiffany to see the arc of their friendship, to understand their personal narratives. I'm a painter. I often listen to podcasts when I work in the studio, and I love having the bittersweet life in the studio with me.